All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Caleb Slater. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I will be emceeing this event tonight. It's really great to see everybody here, and it's encouraging to see a lot of local and grassroots support for local candidates, even if Omicron and COVID forces us to continue to do things over Zoom, which we had hoped to be over by now. So I'll quickly just say a little bit about myself. Last year, I was elected president of University Democrats at Iowa, which is an organization that seeks to promote Democratic candidates and their agendas here at the University of Iowa in order to ensure the representation of progressive values locally and statewide. So we do phone banks, we do lobby nights, we host candidates, and we hope to encourage people to engage with college students, through their campaigns. I find this kind of work really important because we are in a time where there's only one party in our two-party system that truly respects and seeks to uphold democratic values. So the Republican State Party has made it harder to vote. Republican Senator Jake Chapman has called for arresting teachers who try to expose students to diverse perspectives. Governor Reynolds wants to pass a massive tax cut for the rich, as if we haven't seen other states like Kansas the disastrous effects of similar policies on state employees like teachers, who work so hard to make sure that students are receiving the best education possible. There's no excuse. Democrats have to fight back. Johnson County is one of the bluest counties and areas in Iowa. We vote for Democrats way more than a lot of other counties in Iowa. And so it's really imperative that although general election voters shouldn't be taken for granted by the campaigns, it's important to acknowledge the privilege that we have as Democrats here in Johnson County in being able to choose candidates who have the ability to be strong advocates for progressive values. So 2022 will be our opportunity to send bold progressive candidates to Des Moines. We have a lot of really great candidates running for important offices across the state. Let's set the agenda. Let's protect democracy. Let's protect teachers. Let's do all of these things that our party stands for. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and step off my soapbox here and introduce somebody who is already fighting this good fight in Des Moines and has been since her election in 2018. I'm really happy to introduce Senator Claire Celsi, who's from West Des Moines. She serves on committees focused on state government, government oversight, natural resources, education, appropriations, and administration and regulations. Senator Celsi works tirelessly to promote the interests of all Iowans, especially on issues regarding education, water quality, and government transparency. So without further ado, welcome Senator Claire Celsi.
Thank you so much, Caleb. Hi, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Andrew has been my clerk now for, is this your third year, Andrew?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. So he's been terrific. In a little bit, I'm going to post a freshman picture of Andrew on my Senator Claire Celsi Facebook page, so you can see how sharply he dresses when he is in the Senate, sitting next to me. This year, he's working mostly virtually because of Omicron and because of his busy schedule, but he is able to multitask and do what he needs to do to help me from Iowa City. So there's no use in having him risk his life sitting in a Senate with maskless people walking around. So we've worked it out so that he can work mostly from his home this year. So thank you for inviting me. I am here to attest to what a young man of character Andrew Dunn is, and why he will be perfect for the office he seeks, the Iowa House of Representatives. I have seen how hard he works. I have seen him balance a workload both in his school schedule and his work for money schedule. A couple of years ago when he was in Des Moines with me, he would leave the Senate at 5 o'clock or whenever he got off work and go work his second job, probably till 10 or 11 p.m. and managed to be there on time the next morning, looking sharp, ready to work. So he has a great work ethic. I have seen that up close and personal. He never made any excuses. He was always there on time, always ready to do the work, and always did the work. So I've seen it up close. Then one of the nice things about learning on the job is that you get to see the legislative process up close. And it is like sausage making, just like they say. It is very ugly sometimes, and there's a lot of procedural hurdles. So having Andrew have that firsthand knowledge and of how things work, he'll be able to hit the ground running. And I think that's cannot be understated how valuable that is. It took me almost a year to learn all that stuff, and that's probably time that I could have spent better serving my constituents. So Andrew will be able to skip all that minutia and go straight to the helping the people part. I talked to Andrew a little bit about what I plan to say about him tonight. And I'm just kind of ad-libbing this part, but there are every single person on this call has a degree of privilege, and Andrew is no exception. However, he also has the benefit of coming from a working class family who had setbacks and had to show true grit to get, out of trouble to where they're at, and to help family members like Andrew succeed. So he is, not someone who walks into this lightly. He is someone who is very close to the fight for working families, very close to what it's like to have to scrape by. So Andrew has all that experience under his belt through his own personal experience, and he'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Andrew, I just can't understate, will be a wonderful representative. He is the type of person that we're trying to attract and retain in our state. Whenever I want to know what a young person thinks, I always ask Andrew. And, I'm a senator and all, but he just treats me like a normal person and tells me like it is. So if I have a dumb idea, he tells me. If I need to add some nuance to my idea, he tells me. So I listen to his advice and I value his advice. So I cannot be more thrilled to be here today and to be endorsing my friend, your future state representative, Andrew Dunn. And thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Claire. That really means a lot. I'd first like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I cannot express how much it means to me to have you all here, whether you're a friend, a family member, a volunteer, or a curious member of the public. I'm so thankful for you taking the time out of your day to join us this afternoon. Tonight, I'll be sharing my story, why I'm running, what I know needs to be done, and what you can do to help. So who is Andrew Dunn? I am a 7th generation Iowan raised in a family of teachers, nurses, and blue-collar workers. My dad worked in food service for 50 years. My mom is a registered nurse. My grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse in Cromwell, Iowa, and my aunt and cousins are teachers at Norwalk High School in Central Iowa. I'm a product of Iowa public education. I'm a product of urban and rural Iowa, and I'm also a diehard Democrat. I spent the first 13 years of my life in Ames until shortly after the Great Recession. The recession changed everything for me and my family. I'm in this race because of my family. My mom and dad are two of the hardest working people I know. They gave everything to provide for me and my sisters. When the recession hit, my parents were working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Eventually, it didn't matter how many hours they worked. We still lost our home, their jobs, and after countless overtime hours, my father's health. While trying to survive on SNAP and CHIP benefits, we paid thousands of dollars a month for insurance trying to keep my dad alive as he wrestled with diabetes, pancreatic cancer, and a heart attack. At the time, it felt like many of the parts of the system were working against the interests of the average working class family that I grew up in. My parents taught me the importance of hard work, of fairness, of equity, and of standing up for what you believe in, no matter the obstacles. That's why since I was 14 years old, I've done everything I could to advocate for candidates and causes that advance the welfare and well-being of working people. I started as a volunteer for Barack Obama in 2012. then served on 3 legislative advisory councils for youth, families, and criminal juvenile justice. Within 5 years, I was elected to local party leadership. By 2018, I joined the gun violence prevention movement and began leading the major statewide nonprofit March for Our Lives, Iowa. After working the 2020 general election, when we found out the control of the United States Senate was going to depend on 2 runoff elections in Georgia, I packed up my bags and moved to Atlanta to join the fight to elect Senators John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. More recently, I left a position with the American Civil Liberties Union, where I worked every single day to raise money for their efforts to end voter suppression nationwide. Last Monday, as Senator Celsey mentioned, I started my 3rd legislative session in the Iowa Senate, serving her. I've done this and more because I'm committed to serving our state and local community. I know that the only way to do and show that is by putting in the hours and doing the work. We need people that will put in the work now more than ever. Our state faces an onslaught. Our government is controlled by a party that detests democracy. The levers of power are held by people who wish to discriminate against our people, disempower our communities, and disenfranchise those in society who need their voices heard the most. When elected, I will fight tooth and nail every single day for our community. Here are 3 things that I will prioritize in that effort. First, public education. We need to invest in our schools and educators to ensure that our students at every level receive the world-class education Iowa has long been known for. No charter schools, no vouchers, no money taken away from our kids' collective future. Iowa must stop its chronic underfunding of education. Education is the lifeblood of our community here in Iowa City and so many more across the state. It is the single greatest mechanism used to break cycles of poverty. I believe that education is liberation. As a product of the public education system and with family in the game, I will use every tool in the toolbox to defend our public schools, secure higher wages for teachers, and return local control to school boards and municipalities that know the best ways to keep our kids safe. On environment, quite simply, our planet is in crisis. For hundreds of years, we have engaged in unsustainable exploitation of the Earth's resources. We have leveled forests for paper, burned native prairie for farmland, and drilled deeper than any other form of life in search of fossil fuels that pollute and warm our atmosphere. Our past actions have ensured that in the next 30 years, we will see more extreme and dangerous weather events, drought, wildfires, coastal disintegration, along with decreases in global biodiversity. Iowa, as a bastion of industrial agriculture, sits in the gunner seat and the crosshair of this crisis. That's why I support policy that would make Iowa carbon neutral or negative within a decade. It's absolutely necessary. That's why I support a moratorium on new and developing confined animal feeding operations and a top to bottom rework of Iowa's nutrient reduction strategy that has failed by every metric. Iowans deserve clean water and a livable climate. It's also why I'm a member of the Iowa Farmers Union and advocate for regenerative agricultural practices that stop treating our soil like a mineral mine and treat it like the living organism it is. It needs protecting. If we fail to act, we have everything to lose. Finally, we need to build an Iowa people want to live in. Again, put simply, Iowa's GOP government is failing to make our state a place people want to stay in. They're driving people away with radical social, economic, and environmental policies. I pledge to you to work every day to make Iowa a place our kids want to stay in, to get a job, buy a home, start a family. And that starts with making sure that Iowa is affordable for everyone, whether in the midst of the Great Recession or in the COVID-19 pandemic. Affordable housing, childcare, and food insecurity have always been issues for us. Far too many people in our communities are on the street and hungry. We can and must do more. Critical to making housing affordable is raising wages and expanding rights for workers. Our labor market needs to be competitive if we want our talent to stay here. Our workers deserve a good wage, benefits, and the absolute right to collectively bargain. Keeping people here also means affording everyone reproductive rights. We cannot allow our state to go back to the 1800s. All people need to feel safe in their doctor's office and know that they have the right to their own bodily autonomy. We must codify the protections of Roe v. Wade. I'm not naive enough as to think that this is all going to happen when I'm elected to Iowa House. Achieving these goals requires a new project and a new perspective. As Democrats, we now no longer have the privilege to wait until the next cycle to organize. Should we want to build a government that serves working class families and not big ag and tech firms, we need to act now. Immediate action, I hope as you understand, is something I'm quite used to. I'm an organizer through and through, and right now, again, we need organizers now more than ever. If we want to implement forward-looking policies that provide quality public education to our kids, combat the climate crisis, and guarantee access to affordable healthcare to all Iowans, we need a Democratic majority. Building coalitions, talking to rural voters, changing hearts and minds are all at the very core of every organizer's job. When elected, I will be your organizer, someone completely and utterly dedicated to building up our party, our community, and our power. While we need organizers, we need to elect someone with the policymaking experience necessary to turn ideas into reality, relationships into partnerships, and bills into law. Having worked in and around government for close to 6 years, facilitating the passage of bills to fund education, protect the health of students, and ensure Iowa is a safe place for all people, I know that I am well equipped to serve you in the Iowa House, to speak truth to power, to bring your voices to Des Moines, and build the majority. We can't do this alone. This campaign is about more than one person. If you can, I'm asking today for a contribution to my campaign to keep this going. If that's not within your means, don't worry about it. If you're willing to share some time and volunteer for the campaign, please do. It's worth its weight in gold, and we need all hands on deck. You all know who I am now. You know why I'm in this. And the reason is I'm in this for you. I'm in this for my family and our community. I'm Andrew Dunn, and I'm humbly requesting your support to serve as the next representative for Iowa House District 90. Finally, before we go into a Q&A, I'd like to make an acknowledgement. Let me take a drink right before I do that. Today's a really important day. On this day, 93 years ago, January 15th, 1929, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born. His legacy, his fight for freedom, representation, and for justice lives with us today. In the modern era, so much of what Dr. King fought for is still relevant. America now faces the largest onslaught of racially motivated voter disenfranchisement laws since the end of the Jim Crow era. Many states are pursuing partisan and racist gerrymandering, and hate crimes are on the rise. As members of our Iowa City community, of our Johnson County community, as Iowans and Americans, we must do and demand more. I'd like to ask that you join me in a moment of silence and reflection to honor Dr. King's memory and legacy. Thank you. Dr. King's legacy is more important, again, now than ever. We need to take action at every level to defend voting rights and all members of our communities. That's why I'd like to invite everyone here, if you're in or around Johnson County, to attend the 2022 MLK Day Parade Protest and Car Parade this Monday, January 17th, on MLK Day, starting at 11:30 a.m. at the United Action for Youth at Eastdale Plaza. That concludes my remarks. And again, my name is Andrew Dunn, and I am humbly requesting your support for my candidacy, the Democratic nomination for Iowa House District 90. Thank you so much.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and get into the Q&A portion of this. And so I think the best way for this to work is if you're interested in asking a question, you can either drop it in the chat or you can use the raise hand function. The way to get to that is by pressing the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a button that says raise hand. You can click on it and your hand will go up. And then the host of this meeting will lower your hands as your question is asked. So we can start with Heather, and yeah.
Go ahead, Heather. Heather, you can unmute whenever you're ready. She might be having some technical difficulties. If you're having issues with your mic, you can just put the question in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. Any other questions?
Looks like Tony Curran is raising his hand. Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, I was just curious. So if you wanted to volunteer or donate, those links are in the chat, right?
Correct. Yes, Tony.
Oh, okay. And do you have any events coming up?
So one thing that we do every Monday, we do a virtual community forum. So you can jump on a Zoom link. It's located on my website and my Facebook page. And if you have any questions for me or really want to talk about anything, every Monday from 7 to 8:30 p.m. I am available and on that call to make sure that everyone can get as much contact with me and as possible.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you. And yes, Stevens, I can totally get that for you. Or Kyle, could you grab the community forum link?
It also looks like Heather's question is in the chat. It says, what can Iowa government do to combat the rise of violent domestic extremism? Yeah.
So that's a really good question. It's something that we're not just dealing with in Iowa, it's something we're dealing with nationwide. Personally, I think that one of the best things that we can do as not even just Democrats, as interested members of our state and community, is work to build community. Critical to party building is building relationships and building trust. And I think that a huge thing that we do as we look to expand our Democratic majority is to go into communities, invest in communities, listen to people, make them feel heard. When we create relationships with people, when we look them in the eye, when we show them respect and the dignity of listening to them, the dignity of having a bit of our time, that can be a push, right? It's not necessarily going to solve the problem. If we're dealing with violent domestic extremists, there's a lot more that needs to be done. But the research shows that the crucial and best ways to de-radicalize people is to use people that they trust, that they already know, friends, family members, community leaders. We have to make sure that when we're doing our majority building, that we're building up those bases of communities. So people that people already know, that they already trust. And I think that that's really crucial. It's not going to be like myself or some other higher up in the Democratic Party can come in and set a policy and we're going to solve domestic extremism. That's not possible. It's something that's going to require an intensive community effort at every level. I hope that answers your question, Heather. And thank you for asking.
All right, it looks like we've got a raised hand from Jareen here. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I think I unmuted myself. Being a younger person, yes, being all of you younger people, you know how important the use of social media is to get the word out. And I'm less, fluent in that than many. But could you send out an email to everybody on your email list that says, here's what you can do to promote the message, on social media. And one thing I would love to have is a recording of the comments that you just made, Andrew. There'll be some ads made, and ads are good and they're short and they get people's attention. But, the kind of authenticity that you have in something that's a personal message like that, I would love to see if we can't spread that around a lot.
I'm definitely with you there. That'll absolutely be provided. And while we're mentioning email lists, I will say I would encourage everyone that's on here to join my email list. Aside from just hearing updates about the campaign, one of the things that we're really focusing on is, as I'm working in and around the legislature, giving people updates from what I see, what I learn about what is happening, and giving people a perspective on that. As a person who's working in the state Senate, who has the privilege of working in the state Senate, I'm going to be affording that perspective in a very unique way. So feel free to subscribe to that. Otherwise, Jareen, you're absolutely right. We did record this so far, and that is certainly going to be put into a shareable format, whether it's on YouTube or something else. So you'll absolutely receive that. Thank you for your question.
All right, and it looks like we've got a couple questions in the chat. This first one is, it says, Governor Reynolds' State of the State mentioned working towards daycare enhancement and affordability. Great issue to see eye to eye with State House Republicans. Are there other issues that different sides can work together and get results?
Yeah, I do think that there are different things that Democrats and Republicans can work on that are going to improve the lives of Iowans. I had a conversation with someone today that made it very clear to me that a lot of people who are outside of the direct orbits of government don't realize that a large majority of the bills that are passed are bipartisan. We do focus a lot on the really important controversial issues when it comes to the media, but in terms of the majority of legislation, not necessarily how consequential it is. The vast majority of stuff is bipartisan. Specifically, something that I'm interested in, I've often been really interested in tech policy, and one thing that I am hopeful to try to address at some point. I have priorities that are more important to this, as I'm sure you'll probably understand when you hear me talk about it, is internet neutrality, as well as something called the right to repair. Internet neutrality is, the equal treatment of web traffic. It's kind of a complicated thing, but making sure that internet neutrality is the policy of our state, and regulating our telecommunications providers to act in that particular manner is something that is deeply in the interest of every single person in this state, especially as we have a lot of rural communities that have only access to one internet service provider. I think that it is something that we could theoretically get some bipartisan support for. In terms of right to repair, something that a lot of people who are in the phone or electronics business are interested in. Basically, it means that you can't have your warranty voided if you go to a licensed or otherwise professional, device service provider to repair a device, rather than just going to the people that you bought the device from. It's also really in the interest of farmers. A lot of farmers want to be able to not have to go to John Deere or International Harvester to repair their tractors or other implements. So it's something that does have cross-party support, especially cross-base support. So those are just a couple things that come off the top of my head. And of course, again, I'll say the majority of things are bipartisan. It's where we get to the things that really fire people up, and reasonably so, importantly so, where we get the real discourse, the vitriol, and the need for real action. Thank you.
And I think this next question kind of goes along with that perfectly. Gregory Stevens asks, good legislators work on issues that are important but don't get much publicity. For example, benefited fire districts or fence law. What are you hearing from people that are boring but important issues?
Yeah, and that's a pretty difficult thing to say because most people are really worried about those hot button issues. So Greg, I will admit to you, I've not heard a lot about fire districts or fence law. I would say probably um, the most boring, and it's really hard to call this boring, is people that are worried about making sure we don't squander the $1.5 billion surplus. I mean, most of the stuff that we're talking about is hot button stuff, and that's one of them. But budgets aren't sexy, so I would say that's probably it. But nothing like. Actually, I take that back. I had a really great conversation with a guy who he works in the agricultural business. He works for farm service, and he was very concerned about workforce. And one of the things that he did was facilitate truckers moving anhydrous ammonia from place to place, from farm to farm. And it's a great job, great pay, great benefits. The way licensing works in the state of Iowa means that it is a job that is completely unavailable to people that are under the age of 21, even if they were to receive training, even if they were to have a guidance, like some sort of apprenticeship or anything like that. So he was expressing to me how it really sucks for him because he can't get people to get into his trade because they're cut off as soon as they get out of high school. So I would say probably that. I mean, there's a lot of work that can be done with ensuring that safety is managed, as well as we're opening up vocational or other type of trade jobs to everyone in the community. And I think that is a thing that I can support. If you have a supervisor, you have certification, and you're 18, I don't see why you reasonably should be shut off from a job that can pay up to $70,000 a year, give you health care, and is desperately needed at this point. So I would say probably that. I'm glad I remembered that. Thank you.
It looks like sorry.
Yeah,
it looks like the next question in the chat here is from Mary. Mary asks, when I was a kid, Iowa had one of the most liberal Democratic delegations of any state in the US, referring to federal delegations. Now 80% of US counties and at least 95 of Iowa's 99 counties are majority Republican. Mary asks, how can you explain that? And what can one Democrat do to change that?
Yeah. I would say there are a lot of things to be said about how to explain how we got to where we are. I would say that the easiest way to point to the start of the long road of how we got here is back in the 80s and 90s. So we're going to be talking about political polarization. We're going to talk about media consolidation. So political polarization in the 80s and 90s. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich really toned up the political dialogue that was seen as acceptable in this country. He called Democrats traitors, communists, all sorts of manner of really awful things. He changed the game here. And we've had to deal with that ever since. It was normalized. It's one of the dangerous parts of what Trump has been doing, because the kinds of language that he uses are significantly worse, but now it's been normalized. So we get into this really heated up vitriolic rhetoric from the 1980s and 90s. Then we look back at the Reagan administration. Reagan ceded to the telecommunications companies and revoked the fairness doctrine in media, which basically said that when a certain political perspective is given, that equal opportunity to the other side has to also be given, right? So if a political candidate were to come on, they would have to have the equal opportunity for their opponent or an opposing view to also speak at the same time. The barriers could be, they could still have to pay or something like that, but it would have to be completely equal. The telecommunications companies argued to the Reagan administration that this was too much of a hurdle and it was causing them to lose money. So Reagan's Federal Communications Commission revoked that rule. And since then, we have been engulfed by media conglomerates that are understanding of the way cognitive dissonance works and selection bias. So people really like to hear what they agree with. And so we get things like Fox News or, even CNN or MSNBC to an extent that are really good at telling people what they want to hear and not necessarily giving the exact right size or both sides, right? Not equating Fox News to the other things. It's awful. But it is true that that's how that works. Those companies are then incentivized to continue to do that, to sensationalize because views get them money. We then look to the mid 2010s, the early 2000s, where we're having social media able to capitalize on this exact same type of thing, but at a much larger, more expansive scale. They're incentivized to create echo chambers where people are just hearing their opinions, just feeling comfortable, and it becomes foreign for them to hear opposing opinions. And so they get angry when they hear anything else. You add on to this, let's go back to 2008. I've spoken with, a lot of union representatives in my time, running this campaign, and it was made really clear to me at one point when I was meeting with the representatives from the Rockwell Collins plant up in North Liberty. Unions kicked butt for Democrats in 2008 and in the lead up to 2008. They won us a trifecta government. We had 2 years or two elections in a row, and they did so to receive some legislative promises and protections and expansions. And we failed to deliver. We passed one of their priorities, and it was vetoed by Chet Culver. So they feel betrayed. Think about at the same time what's happening in 2010 and past Obama's election. We're looking at a massive radicalization of the right wing in the Tea Party, and that message that they're giving to people is the liberal elites don't care about you. They're not acting in your interest. They're just using your votes to get elected and to get power and to do XXX, right? So to me, seems really clear how we got to this position. It's been a long time coming, and we made some really crucial mistakes. Our party speaking, turning our back on organized labor, the people who brought us there. So that's how I see that we got here. How can one Democrat change it is a different question. I see this job as something that requires more than what has happened in the past. So as I want to be an organizer and I want to be lending my skills to small county parties, showing up for them, raising money for them, doing really anything that they need to, feel secure, feel supported where they often have not, is really important. Going into rural Iowa as someone who is accountable, someone who can make the decisions and showing that you care, being a representative of the party and showing that you care, like I said in my speech, giving people the dignity of our time is incredibly powerful. Showing up matters. And I want to be someone who starts a trend because Democrats need to show up. We cannot win rural Iowa. We cannot win a majority. We cannot win the governor's office if we don't show up in rural Iowa. Rural Iowans like Karen Larson know this. It is impossible. The math doesn't work. So what I want to do is I want to work with the organizations that are doing incredible work right now past the 2020 election, the New Iowa Project, and there's another organization that's working kind of under the radar in Des Moines to do research-based organizing, community building, and building our bench across the state. One person cannot snap our fingers and fix it all, but one person can start the trend. One person can make people feel heard. One person can get other people to do the same thing. And that's a huge thing of what I want to do. Thank you, Mary.
All right. And I think the next question in the chat was from Jordan. They ask, Andrew, what do you think will be your biggest challenge this year specifically with continuing your campaign and journey as a politician?
It's a good question. Biggest challenge. I don't know. I mean, I guess, fundraising is always a challenge for everyone. So if you can donate, but it's not an insurmountable challenge, of course. So by and large, I've not really heard a lot of pushback from the community. I mean, a lot of people think about my age, but the experience that I have has really 10 years, knowing from a very young age what I want to do and who I want to help, has really tempered people's potential prejudices towards me as a young person. So I would say probably, yeah, you can never have enough money as a local candidate or anything like that. It's probably that.
All right, and since this event goes till 5, we probably have time for a few more questions. The next question in the chat is from Leslie, who asks, Andrew, it is difficult for any bill filed by a Democrat to get a subcommittee meeting. Would you consider developing relationships and letting a Republican file a bill either with you or for you for the sake of helping Iowans?
Yes.
All right. And this next question after that is from Harry. Harry says, hi, Andrew. I'm a recent U Iowa graduate and current resident of Iowa City. If elected, you would be the representative for most of campus, downtown Iowa City student housing, as well as a significant portion of Iowa City's adult population. You would have a large number of constituents of different walks of life. What's the number one thing you believe you could offer to, one, an 18-year-old college freshman just starting their life, and two, a lifelong resident of Iowa City who both want someone to, quote unquote, go to bat for them? Why do you feel you would be the best choice to represent both of their interests in Des Moines?
I think a big part of this, a big part of politics, of dealing with elected officials, is for a lot of people, they put them on a pedestal. It feels potentially uncomfortable to talk with them. And I think that for both students and for people in the community, the way that I both present myself as a young person, the way that I present myself as accessible to all members of the community, I think a huge part is going to be how easy it is to talk to me and how willing I am to listen. I believe that my values align with, we're going to say on a broad, statistically speaking, my values align with young people. My values also, this is a progressive district. We can also say, by and large, represent this district. And so I think that it's really important to listen to people, whether they're young people, whether they're, people that have been living in Iowa City for 30, 40, 50 years. They need to know that someone is going to be listening to them. They need to have someone that they feel comfortable talking to and that they can trust is going to act on what they say. And I am cultivating my interactions with people in my campaign to make that loud and clear. So I hope that answers your question, Harry.
All right, and then as a follow-up question, Leslie asks, would you like to comment on your thoughts for further work to improve mental health treatment in Iowa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Leslie, as you very well know, there's a lot that needs to be done. You, in fact, so if I can speak a little bit about you, Leslie, is that okay? I can't see you on screen if you're saying anything.
She gave a thumbs up.
Yes,
Perfect. Yes. So a couple weeks ago, Leslie gave me an incredibly moving presentation about the state of mental health care in Iowa and how dire it is. We are currently ranked 51st in the nation. We currently have, I believe, 69 beds out of a need for a lot more. So comments on what we can do to improve mental health treatment in Iowa. One thing that I support as a policy is creating a program that allows for student loan forgiveness for counselors or other mental health specialists or providers who wish to stay in the state of Iowa. At the same time that we do that, we're making an investment in people's lives and jobs and livelihoods. We also need to be making investments in actual physical structures and infrastructure to, take care of people. At the same time, again, we also need to make sure that, the police office, or pardon me, the police department, the sheriff's office aren't the first place we go when someone is in crisis. Your presentation showed me that, well, I mean, I knew that too before, but showed me that in explicit clarity, and would absolutely be something that I would very much so pursue when elected. We need more money for mental health care. We need more facilities, and we need more people. And we're fortunate enough to have some great institutions in the state of Iowa, educational institutions. And I think that we need to do a lot more to keep people that are learning about mental health, becoming providers. We need to do a lot more to keep them here because there's a shortage here. There's a shortage of a lot of things: mental health care providers, doctors, especially for rural Iowa. And, now it's going to be teachers, but even worse. So I hope that answers your question as well. And thank you for it as well.
So it looks like we've got two people with their hands up, and we probably have enough time to get to both of those questions, I'm guessing. Okay, so the first one that I see is Karen. Karen, you can go ahead and ask your question.
I have less of a question and more of a testimonial. I met Andrew in 2018 when he worked with me on my campaign for the Iowa House in probably one of the toughest districts in the nation in Northwest Iowa. Everything that's been said about Andrew is true. And I have had the greatest pleasure recently in watching his evolution. When he was helping with me with my campaign, I thought that was about me. No, that was about training Andrew for what he's doing now. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with his growth and his development. And as I listen to him today, I hear him in the mold of Berkeley Bedell, famous Iowa U.S. House of Representative member. Whether we're talking about the cultural solution to fragmented social relationships and domestic terrorism, it's human connection, or whether we're talking about reinstating Democrats in rural Iowa, that's human contact. Andrew and I together, we turned some Republican county commissioners to vote for me in my campaign. And he's talking about just exactly what's going to work. Andrew knows how to be with people, and that's to be with people face to face. I can't be any more impressed. I don't have a question. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Yeah.
All right, and now we've got Sean with a question. You can go ahead, Sean.
Hey, thanks. And I want to acknowledge the challenge of Democrat state legislators in our current government climate, but recognize there's some real important work that needs to be done in getting some things passed, but also keeping things from being passed. And so I'm curious what you can do and what we can do to pass things like a ban on the LGBTQ panic defense, which has passed the House unanimously and will be before the Senate this session. But also to stop some of the other attacks, say on trans student athletes or the proposed bathroom bills and this kind of thing that's been brought up and will be arising again as a hot button issue, but that deeply touches our lives in Iowa.
Yeah. So I will express that I've spoken with a lot of people in the LGBTQ advocacy community, specifically people or Kin and Crow with One Iowa, about where we think things are going to go with the with banning the trans panic defense. I am reasonably confident enough that I'd probably put a bit of money on it that that's going to pass through the legislature. Very thankfully. With regards to stopping a lot of the other stuff, that's difficult, but it also requires the same kind of stuff that I've been talking about, really everything with community building, right? A real big problem that I've noticed in advocacy spaces in Iowa is that a lot of people, excuse me, a lot of people in organizations like to claim credit for things when that does not matter. That does not matter to me at all, right? The important thing is getting it done. And so when it comes to, specifically the issues that you're talking about, we need to have an organized, unified front of solidarity, right? Making it clear to the Bible beaters in the House, Bible beaters in the Senate, that this stuff is not okay. We have to do that in a comprehensive way. It cannot just be like, this is just going to hurt X people, because let's be real, how much do they really care about those people? We have to make the case on grounds of humanity. We have to make the case on the grounds of the wellness and the wellness of our state. And as I was saying in my speech, we have to make the case that people aren't going to want to live here when they're pulling shit like this, which is absolutely true. Queer people are always going to exist. They have existed for all of human history. And laws that alienate them, that vilify them, and even in some regards can criminalize them for living their own identity, are unacceptable. They're unpalatable, and require that unified front that I'm proposing. So our organizations, our legislators need to work together, both to discuss on a very fundamental level what decision will be made if they do choose to approve some of these horrendous bills that you're talking about. Of course, not the trans-panic defense one. That's a good thing. And appeal to their humanity. Talk to people about, like, what if you're a kid? That's something that can work with people sometimes. The legislature is a little bit of a different animal. People may act the way they want because they can, but we can't stop trying. That being said, if the whole of the caucus decides that they want to do something, that's really hard. That's really, really hard. And I'm not saying that there's no use at all, but in terms of procedure, there are a few avenues for recourse. So our best hope is to have our activists, our legislators, and our community members act in a way and advocate in a way that is unified to protect all members of our community, no matter how they look, how they identify, or where they're from. I think that appeal to humanity, that appeal to the empathetic portion of people's psychology is something that can get us to the point where this type of stuff can be defeated. And I do think more likely than not, it will be. But it is a fight that we have to fight. It is not one that we can just say, oh, like the trans-panic bill, just based on what has already happened, is going to pass or fail. We cannot allow that. We can't sit. So I hope that answers your question. Please tell me if it does or doesn't. Thank you so much.
All right, and it looks like it is 4:59. So I will pass it back over to you, Andrew, to close this out if you'd like. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So, yeah, thank you all for being here, for your incredible questions. Like I said earlier, this campaign is not about one person. It's not about one, particular goal. It's about the community. It's about making sure that our community has a voice. And it's making sure our party is able to do the work that needs to be done to make sure that voice is heard and turned into law. So I'll just reiterate what I said during my speech. If you're able to contribute to my campaign, I would be incredibly grateful. If not, your time is just as much, if not more valuable. It's a very long time until election day. So if you change your mind in the future, that's totally cool. I'm not going to judge you. And I would really appreciate anything anyone here can do. Thank you so much for being here tonight, everyone.